Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Mia Tamburi, Program Director of Cancer Bridges and member of the Education and Outreach Work Group for the Cancer and the Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania. Today's presentation, Reducing Exposures to Chemicals in Foods While Nourishing Your Body for Cancer Prevention, provides an opportunity to explore this topic from the unique perspective of Crystal Pace, dietitian for the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program. Based at the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public Health, the Mid-Atlantic Regional Public Health Training Center is a part of the national network of public health training centers that are funded by the Health Resources and Services Administration. Serving as the central office, they collaborate with community-based training partners in the development and delivery of training opportunities to the current and future public health workforce. Appearing on the slides are their partners. These partners include academic institutions, public health organizations and agencies, and networks of community health centers. If you happen to get disconnected, please log back into the webinar. If you need technical assistance, please send a message via the chat box. Also, please enter your questions and comments in the chat box throughout the presentation. This speaker series is a project of the Education and Outreach Work Group for Cancer and the Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania, which is composed of organizations and individuals who are concerned about environmental chemicals and how they are contributing to our region's high rates of cancer. These organizations that co-sponsor today's webinars are Cancer Bridges, formerly Our Clubhouse and Cancer Caring Center. At Cancer Bridges, we provide support for those impacted by cancer, including counseling, support groups, health and wellness classes, family and youth activities, and much more. Young Adult Survivors United, a community in Western PA for young adult cancer survivors and their co-survivors, and the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. LLS focuses on blood cancers and improving the quality of life of patients and their families through research, education, policy, and advocacy. The websites for these organizations will be found in the chat. Also, if you would like to have a copy of today's presentation, there will be a PDF in the chat for download. At this time, I would like to introduce Crystal Pace. Crystal is a registered dietitian for the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program. She is also a certified intuitive eating counselor, yoga teacher, and board certified health and wellness coach. After graduating with her BS degree in nutrition from the University of New Hampshire, Crystal went on to pursue her master's degree in nutrition from New York University. Her specialty lies in helping individuals learn to eat without the side of guilt, teaching others how to properly nourish, respect, and appreciate their bodies. Crystal believes in the importance of taking a personalized, holistic approach toward optimal health and well-being. Thank you, Crystal. Audience, if you have not already done so, you may enter your questions in the chat at the end, and when time allows, Crystal will answer those questions.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I just want to make sure that you can hear me okay. So if you could verbally let me know or type in the chat, that would be very helpful. So is my audio coming in clear? Everyone could hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. And hopefully you could see my screen. It should have a picture of some colorful peppercorns and an onion, reducing exposure to chemicals in food while nourishing your body for cancer prevention. Can everyone see my screen? I'm looking at the chat. I think I'm seeing yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that feedback. So I'm so excited to be here with everyone, and we have a lot to cover. So I figure let's dive in. Just a friendly reminder, I know sometimes with virtual learning platforms, it could be challenging to pay attention, right? I feel like we live in just a time where it's, multitasking in a society that kind of encourages multitasking. So I just want to invite you, you're taking this time out for your health, your well-being. So kudos to you. So really give yourself this full hour. So if there's anything that you need to get more comfortable, please take a moment to do so, including even just getting maybe a notepad or pen if you'd like to take some notes, which I encourage, and we'll get started. So I just want to talk briefly about the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program. I am speaking on behalf of the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program today, and there's just so much information and resources that if you wanted to learn more after today, that I'm going to direct you to, that the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program has. So what is the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program? Essentially, the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program is an online course. It's completely free to you, and it's an expert-led program that helps you make healthy and informed lifestyle choices to reduce your risk of cancer, cancer recurrence, and also chronic illness. So essentially, it's an online course, but we also have a number of resources, including recorded webinars related to topics including diet, fitness, change, mindset, environment. And we're going to be talking a lot about diet and environment today in terms of reducing cancer risk. And we also have not only webinars, the online course, also ebooks as well, and blog posts and many resources that I'll be sharing with you today. So if you would like to learn more, you can visit www.anticancerlifestyle.org. So the anti-cancer diet module, I just wanted to highlight because there's only so much we could cover in an hour. We are going to get through a lot of the main takeaways. However, the anti-cancer lifestyle program diet module goes through simple nutrition tips that can help you make nutritious food choices to reduce your risk of cancer and chronic illness in general. So these are just some of the topics that are covered. So if you're interested in learning more, feel free to visit the anti-cancer lifestyle program website. So what will we be discussing today? So essentially, we're going to talk all about the benefits of consuming a primarily plant-based diet for cancer prevention. We'll talk about certain foods that have anti-cancer properties, explore foods that have been associated with increased cancer risk, and then we're also going to be discussing ways to reduce exposure to potentially harmful chemicals in food and beverages. So let's just first start by talking about some background information related to nutrition and cancer. So it's estimated that 1/3 of some of the most common cancers and 1/4 of cancers overall could be prevented by healthy dietary choices and maintaining physical activity levels. The American Institute for Cancer Research and the World Cancer Research Fund develop recommendations for cancer prevention based on an extensive review of the literature. And a lot of these recommendations we're going to be going over today. So I always like to focus on, or spend most of the time focusing on which foods to enjoy more of to reduce cancer risk. There's so much emphasis just in our society and culture on what to limit, what to avoid. There's a lot of food fear in this nation as well, and feeling guilt and shame when we eat. This has actually become quite normalized in our culture. So I always like to first start off and spend most of the time talking about which foods do we want to enjoy and eat more of that we know can help reduce cancer risk and risk for other chronic illnesses as well. So plant-based diets, when we look at all the research on nutrition and cancer, it becomes quite clear that the majority of the literature supports that plant-based foods have been found to be protective against many types of cancers. There's many reasons for this. So plant foods are rich in phytochemicals, which are beneficial plant-based compounds, vitamins, minerals, as part of the whole food have been found to protect against cancer. We'll talk a little bit about supplements and how the evidence isn't as strong for supplements in terms of, for example, taking vitamin C out of an orange and isolating it into a pill. A lot of the research is showing that food has these powerful synergistic properties. So consuming these whole plant-based foods has been found to have the most benefits. Consumption of plant-based foods may also affect hormones influential in the cancer process. So this is another potential reason why we're seeing in the literature we're seeing these benefits associated with eating plant-based eating and reduction in cancer risk. And also, plant foods have a lot of fiber, and high fiber intake has been associated with reduced risk of many cancers, including breast cancer, colorectal cancer, and more. And something that I always like to say is, I should have said this a little earlier on. When I say the word diet, so for example, plant-based diet, for the purpose of this webinar, I'm not referring to something that is restrictive in nature. So that involves cutting calories or food groups or anything like that. It's more so when I say the word diet, I'm referring to the other definition, which includes just a way someone habitually eats. So when I say plant-based diet, it's not referring to vegan or even vegetarian. It's just eating more plants in the diet and less animal products. And we'll be talking more about this. So we also know these are some other proposed mechanisms. If you're interested in the science like me, and the reasons why, why are we seeing these benefits with plants and reduction in cancer risk? Well, plants have a lot of antioxidants, so including carotenoids, flavonoids, and you don't have to remember these names of the compounds, but if you're interested, these are the names of some of the compounds, and other polyphenols that are important for protecting our DNA. So this is another reason why we might be seeing these benefits. And a predominantly plant-based diet, so eating mostly plants, more plants, may provide greater protective effects than consuming any particular nutrient or compound or individual food alone. So for example, some clients will ask me, well, once in a while I have a burger and that's meat. Should I be concerned? And I think this really highlights we want to take into account the total context of eating, right? So this isn't, one eating something one time, even 1 week, 1 day that's going to make or break our cancer risk. It's over time. What are we doing day to day, week to week, and what's the ratio of our diet from, plants versus animals, so to speak. So part of the reason I love food and nutrition is just this synergistic properties of food. So how all these different compounds and chemicals in food quite literally work together to benefit human health and well-being. So nutrients and phytochemicals from plant foods seem to work synergistically to reduce cancer risk in ways we still have yet to understand. So tons of research is constantly being done in this area. Just to give you one example of this, there was a mouse study of prostate cancer, looking at prostate cancer. And what the study found was that, in summary, that a combination of tomatoes and broccoli in the diet was more effective at slowing tumor growth than either tomato or broccoli alone. So I feel like this really just alludes to the power of not only one food or one plant food, but a diet that consists of these colorful plant-based foods. We don't often think about it, but this could have powerful synergistic effects. So we know that higher consumption of fruits and veggies, and this goes for all fruits and vegetables. A lot of people will say, well, Crystal, is there one that's the best? And I say, variety is key, the more the better. And we'll talk about certain fruits or veggies. For example, tomatoes, we'll talk about how they've been studied to have a compound that's beneficial for prostate cancer. So we will get into some specific fruits and veggies, but generally speaking, high fruit and vegetable intake is recommended. And it's been associated with reduced risk for cancer and other chronic health conditions as well. Compounds found in certain fruits and veggies, such as berries, grapes, dark leafy green veggies, can quite literally change our gene expression, which, how our genes are expressed, which genes are turned on, which genes are turned off, through these epigenetic effects that directly and indirectly can regulate cancer progression. So in essence, these changes could silence or promote the expression of genes such as tumor suppression genes. So it's really fascinating when we start to think about how, food has this power to even affect our genes, our gene expression. So quite amazing. So a lot of people will ask me when talking about eating well for cancer prevention, what about organic? What does the science say? Should I be eating everything organic? And the science does show that organic produce has been found to have higher levels of phytochemicals, which are these beneficial plant-based compounds that have potential human health benefits, and lower levels of potentially harmful chemicals such as pesticides and herbicides. So one example of a potentially harmful chemical is glyphosate, which you might have heard of, which is sprayed on many genetically modified crops, and it's been found to be a probable carcinogen. So if it's important to you to reduce your exposure to harmful chemicals, and later in the presentation, we'll talk more about other potentially harmful chemicals and how to reduce our exposure through food and cooking. Something that I always like to recommend as a really helpful resource is the Environmental Working Group, which can, they each year publish, you might be familiar with it, the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 list. So the Dirty Dozen list is, the 12 produce items that if you're going to spend your extra dollar organic, those are the ones that are worthwhile because they've been found to have the highest level of pesticides or herbicides, harmful chemicals. So I always like to share that resource. I do always like to say too that, yes, we have the USDA organic guidelines, right? But, organic really just means food that's grown without harmful chemicals. So that could even be, starting a windowsill herb garden that you're not spraying anything on, or having a garden, right? Growing your own food, or going to the farmer's market. And even if the farmer isn't, certified organic, paying the money for the government seal and, going through the regulations, they may still grow food using organic practices and avoiding using harmful chemicals. So definitely speak to your local farmers as well. All right, so we're actually going to start talking now about different food groups and what to consider choosing more of for cancer prevention. So when we start to talk about grains, we really want to shift the focus from refined grains, which in the typical American diet, most Americans are eating refined grain products, which are things like more of our processed grains. So things made with white flour, pastries, cakes, cookies, things made with sugar, white bread, white rice, white pasta, etc., crackers made with white flour. And we want to shift the focus to eat more whole grains. So why is this? And we'll talk about examples of whole grains as well. So whole grains have been found to protect against colorectal cancer and other cancers as well, along with other chronic illnesses. And the potential reasons for this are whole grains contain fiber and vitamins and minerals and these beneficial plant-based compounds that likely work synergistically to have to create these anti-cancer effects that we're seeing. And we don't get the same nutrients in refined grains. So for example, you won't get the same nutritional value from white bread versus a whole grain bread, such as whole wheat bread. So whole grains, essentially, because I know this can be a really confusing topic for so many, so I like to spend some time just talking about what is a whole grain. So whole grains include all parts of the grain, including the bran, germ, and endosperm. And you don't have to remember those, different parts of the grain, but just know that the whole grain quite literally contains the whole part of the plant or the grain. So whole grains have more nutrients. Some examples are buckwheat, barley, rye, wild rice, steel cut oatmeal. And there's many other whole grains as well. The list really goes on. And essentially whole grains are just, minimally processed or unprocessed compared to the refined grains. They're more in their natural form. So how do you know if something's a whole grain? Well, especially when you are looking at things like cereals or breads or pastas or even crackers, it can be quite tricky. So a good rule of thumb is when you're reading nutrition labels, look for the word whole in the ingredient list, because unfortunately, sometimes food companies will try and trick us. So a bread might say wheat bread and it's brown, it looks nutritious, looks healthy, but then you look at the label and it says made with enriched wheat flour. And you'll see here, we want to avoid enriched grain products because that's just a code word for highly processed. So if you're buying something like wheat bread, you want to look for whole wheat, just as one example. So as I mentioned, we want to eat less refined carbohydrates. So more whole grains, less of the refined carbohydrates. And the reason for this, they have been found excess refined carbohydrates have been found to increase cancer risk through a variety of proposed mechanisms, such as increasing inflammation in the body, affecting our blood sugar regulation, and more. So some examples include sugary cereals, products made from white flour, sweets, pastries, white rice, sugary beverages, etc. And what I always like to point out here is it's not avoid, right? So we're not saying completely avoid for the rest of your life cake and cookies and pastries. No, no, that's not what we're saying. It's just eat less of, and then we want to make more of the grains coming from whole grains. So one of my favorite topics to talk about is eating more legumes. So legumes actually are a group of foods that include soy, and we'll talk about soy in a moment because I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding soy, peanuts, beans, lentils, and peas. So those are examples of legumes. And the reason we're talking about them is because increased consumption of beans and legumes has been associated with reduced risk of colon cancer and other cancers as well. Certain compounds found in soy and other legumes can actually change the way our genes are expressed, as I was talking about earlier, through these epigenetic effects that can directly or indirectly regulate cancer prevention. So, we're actually going to start to talk about soy foods now because there's so much controversy just in our society about soy and cancer. So, soy foods, whole soy based foods such as tofu, tempeh, which is fermented soybeans, edamame, soy milk, soy nuts, are recommended for cancer prevention. Soy, there's a big scare in the media saying, soy has estrogen. And I have so many clients who come to me and they're like, if I eat soy, my estrogen level is going to go up, or am I going to get breast cancer? And that is not the case at all. Soy doesn't increase estrogen levels in the body. Soy has phytoestrogens, and other foods have phytoestrogens as well. And these phytoestrogens, even though they have similar effects to estrogen in the body, they might mimic some of estrogen's effects. They're not estrogen, and they actually work to kind of to simplify it, to reduce the binding of the not so good estrogen to our cells in our body. So this is part of the reason why soy food consumption has been associated with a reduced risk for cancer. So it's a myth that we want to avoid soy. Now, where the controversy lies, and the jury's still out about this, but when we get into processing soy, so for example, creating soy protein isolate, which is found in tons of imitation meats and protein powders. So essentially, even there's some supplements where you have isolated soy, the isolated isoflavones in soy, which are the phytoestrogens. It's tricky. There's some research that has found there's potentially harmful effects if we're isolating compounds in soy and consuming that in high amounts, such as a supplement. So I always like to operate by the precautionary principle. If we don't have enough evidence yet to show that something's for sure harmful, my personal recommendation that I share with all my clients is eating soy from real whole soy-based foods, because we know those foods are beneficial, especially when it comes to reducing cancer risk, and avoiding, processed forms of soy, such as soy protein isolate, soy protein concentrate. And it doesn't even have to be completely avoid, but just being mindful of maybe those areas of your diet where you're getting the highly processed versions of soy, because you're also missing out on nutrients from soy that are really beneficial for you. So when we're getting soy from soy protein isolate, we're not getting calcium in soy or the fiber in soy, or nearly as many of these isoflavones, which are really beneficial for our health and well-being. So in summary, soy foods do not increase cancer risk especially when the soy is coming from whole soy-based foods. And when it comes to processed versions of soy, we really need more research at this time. There's some research that shows processed soy is fine, and then there's some research that shows there's potential for harm with processed versions of soy. So moving on to flax seeds. So flax seeds have omega-3 fats, which you might have heard of, very anti-inflammatory, heart-healthy fats. And research shows that consuming 1 to 4 tablespoons of ground flax seeds a day has been associated with lower risk of breast cancer and also other cancers. Flax seeds contain lignans, which are also phytoestrogens, as we saw in soy. How soy has phytoestrogens, well, so do flax seeds. And these lignans have been found to be really beneficial for us, such as actually shifting, studies have found the lignans can help shift the women's estrogen levels to a form less likely to promote cancer, which is kind of fascinating. They've been found to decrease insulin like growth factor 1 and other growth factors involved in cancer cell proliferation. Lignans have even been found to decrease angiogenesis, which is the creation of new blood vessels to supply the growing tumor with nutrients, quite literally, that enables tumors to grow. And studies supported that flax seeds may have benefits specifically for prostate cancer patients. So I always like to say something, so simple that you can add to your diet that is pretty much flavorless, that goes well in a smoothie and some warm cereal like oatmeal, are flax seeds. All right. So moving on to alliums. So allium vegetables have been found to have powerful anti-cancer properties. So these allicin is one compound that comes to mind. So allium vegetables include garlic, onions, shallots, leeks, and they've been found to protect against, there's a lot of research on stomach cancer, but also all types of cancers. And allicin is this anti-cancer compound that these allium vegetables contain. And a fun fact is that if you leave your alliums chopped for about 10 to 15 minutes or so before you cook them, you can maximize the allicin production. So for example, if you're cooking a lentil soup and it calls for garlic and carrots and celery and other veggies, mince your garlic first and cut your onion first and let it sit for a little bit while you're prepping the other veggies, and that's going to help you get the most allicin out of your alliums. So garlic and other plant-based foods that contain fiber have been found to protect against colorectal cancer. And there's tons of other compounds in allium foods, such as garlic and onions, that also have these effects on our gene expression, as we've been talking about throughout this webinar. Selenium-rich foods have also been found to be cancer protective. So one example that comes to mind is Brazil nuts, which are very high in selenium. And there's many other food sources as well, which I have listed here. And part of the reason we might be seeing the benefits with selenium foods and cancer is because selenium is considered an antioxidant. So it can help fight oxidative damage going on in the body. And we know that a risk factor for cancer development and progression is excessive oxidative damage in the body that could damage our tissues, our organs, our cells, etc. All right. So foods containing lycopene have been found to be beneficial for prostate cancer specifically. And researchers think or are attributing this to that the prostate gland concentrates lycopene. And lycopene is essentially a carotenoid, a beneficial plant-based compound that has powerful antioxidant properties. So what are some sources? Tomatoes, but really any red colored food, such as watermelon, is high in lycopene. And a fun fact is that lycopene in the cooked form is actually more bioavailable, meaning your body is better able to absorb the lycopene than when you eat foods fresh that have lycopene. Now, it doesn't mean you're not getting lycopene from eating a watermelon or, enjoying raw tomatoes in your salad or eating raw cherry tomatoes. You're still getting some, but it's interesting that the lycopene, when we cook the tomatoes, such as in tomato sauce, that actually helps us absorb more of that lycopene, which is interesting. All right. So foods that have vitamin C and beta carotene may protect against various cancers. And I have some food sources listed here of food sources of vitamin C, food sources of beta carotene. A lot of produce items are going to have vitamin C and beta carotene. And they've been found to be protective against many types of cancers, such as cancers of the esophagus, oral cavity, stomach, pancreas, breast, and even more. And at this time, a lot of people ask me, well, what about vitamin C supplements? Should I just take my beta carotene or vitamin C in a supplement form? And it's not recommended to take isolated forms of micronutrients in the form of supplements for cancer prevention and treatment. And in some instances, there's actually some harms that have been found. So for example, beta carotene supplementation has been found to increase lung cancer risk in those individuals who have smoked before or who are smokers. So it's not to say that more is better, and we really want to get these nutrients from food. So cruciferous vegetables, for some reason I love this name, cruciferous vegetables. It's basically a group of vegetables, a family of vegetables that include broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, radish, Brussels sprouts, kale, bok choy, and more. I have a list here. And these are powerful, they have powerful anti-cancer and even anti-inflammatory properties. So they've been found to change our gene expression that could directly and indirectly regulate cancer risk. And a fun fact is that heterocyclic amines, which are carcinogenic compounds, which are potential cancer-causing compounds, they're metabolized more quickly. And these compounds are actually found in meat cooked at high temperatures, which we'll be talking about. So heterocyclic amines are metabolized more quickly by our body when we're eating cruciferous vegetables. So I think this just speaks to the power of plants, which is, it's the power of the synergy of how we eat. So carotenoid-rich foods are also anti-inflammatory, and they help protect against cancer of the mouth, pharynx, larynx, lung, and of other potential health benefits. Alpha carotene and beta carotene found in these red, orange, yellow, and even dark green vegetables and fruits and produce items have carotenoids. And research has found that it could help control cell growth. And there's tons of other benefits as well of these foods, even related to prevention of other chronic diseases aside from cancer. So even just by talking thus far, I just want to even take a moment to pause before we talk about the microbiome briefly. And we could just start to see how there's so many foods that just adding to our diet can help reduce our cancer risk, and just things that we have control over that we could eat more of. And I like to say enjoy more of, because something, is an anti-cancer food, if you're eating it and you don't enjoy it, that probably isn't going to be sustainable. So, using flavorings, which we'll talk about, and enjoying these foods in ways that appeal to your taste buds is just so powerful in terms of something that we can do that we have control over to reduce our cancer risk. So the microbiome, I'm not going to talk a lot about the microbiome just for the purposes of time. However, we know that having a healthy balance of bacteria in our digestive system, and the microbiome essentially just refers to all the different microorganisms that live in our gut or our intestines. So that goes for bacteria, fungi, etc. And we know that having a healthy gut, supporting a healthy gut, can actually help our body produce beneficial compounds that can reduce our cancer risk and promote a healthy colon, such as butyrate and other short chain fatty acids that could even help reduce inflammation in our body. And plant foods, how do we promote a healthy gut? Well, everything we've talked about so far is helpful in promoting a healthy gut. Enjoying probiotic rich foods, which are foods that have live microorganisms in them, such as tempeh, miso, yogurt, kombucha, kimchi, etc. Physical activity, stress management, and also sleeping well. All right, so omega-3 fats, we talked a little bit about them when we talked about flax seeds. So omega-3 fats, the reason we're talking more about them is that we know that from plant and animal sources, such as fatty fish may protect against cancer. So higher levels of omega-3s in the diet have been associated with reduced risk of developing a number of malignancies. And I have some sources of fatty fish listed here. There are resources that I'll share with you. We want to be mindful that unfortunately there's environmental contaminants with fish, such as, mercury. Certain fish, especially the bigger fish like tuna, halibut, et cetera, having higher levels of mercury. So the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Guide is a wonderful resource for choosing safer seafood, along with the Environmental Working Group Seafood Buying Guide. And I think I have those coming up in another slide as well. So we do want to be mindful of that as well. However, omega-3 fats from plant and animal sources have been found to be cancer protective. All right. So we can't really talk about anti-cancer foods and beverages without talking about green tea. There's a lot of research on green tea and cancer. So green tea contains this beneficial compound called EGCG, which has powerful antioxidant effects. Tea polyphenols, so those beneficial compounds found in plants, including tea, may directly inhibit the development of various types of cancers. And we see epigenetic effects from tea polyphenols that could, there's so many different mechanisms when we start to look at, well, why could this be in terms of the reduction of cancer risk, which I won't go over here just for the purposes of time. Um, Antioxidants, green tea and even white tea, black tea, oolong tea, very high in antioxidants. So that could be one reason we're seeing these benefits as well. And then a lot of people ask, well, okay, how much, green tea do I have to drink to get the benefits? Well, even just 1 cup a day has been found. Certain studies have found beneficial. Some studies recommend anywhere from 1 to 3 cups a day. But I think what's important to keep in mind, because, sometimes we'll think more must be better, right? And that's not the case. So consumption of no more than 5 cups of green tea a day is likely adequate for desired benefits with low risk of adverse effects. So it's not, doesn't necessarily mean, the more you drink, the better. Anywhere from even, 1 to 3 cups a day is a really nice rule of thumb. All right. So mushrooms. So I don't know who in our virtual room likes mushrooms, but mushrooms are they have powerful anti-inflammatory properties. So these mushroom polysaccharides have been found to have anti-cancer properties by stimulating our immune response. So they're very anti-inflammatory, they have anti-cancer compounds. And these are just examples of some mushrooms that have immune enhancing and possible anti-cancer activity. So we have shiitake, maitake, reishi, turkey tail, etc. There's some research that shows dried varieties may have higher concentrations than the fresh, but the fresh still have high amounts of these beneficial compounds. The one thing I want to really highlight is that you always want to cook your mushrooms. So raw mushrooms, whenever I see a salad bar and I see raw mushrooms sitting there, I just cringe because one, you don't absorb the beneficial nutrients as well when you eat the mushroom raw. You're not getting a lot of these powerful anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer compounds. And two, there's a natural carcinogen that is inactivated in mushrooms when you cook it, but when you eat it raw, it's not inactive. So again, a carcinogen is just a potential cancer-causing compound. It doesn't mean if you eat, raw mushrooms, you're going to get cancer or anything like that. But to reduce your risk, you want to make sure that you cook all of your mushrooms. So I just wanted to point you to 2 resources that are free, and you could download them and view them on the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program website. I actually created an anti-inflammatory diet ebook where I summarized all of the literature, kind of everything you need to know for reducing inflammation through diet and lifestyle. So you could check that ebook out. And then there's also a webinar that I did, a recorded webinar that you can, if you go on the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program website under webinars, events, and then webinars, you can also view this webinar that I did if you do want to learn more about anti-inflammatory diet and chronic illness. All right. So really briefly, I just want to touch on, and we sort of started talking about some of these topics already, such as the refined carbs, but foods to eat less of to reduce cancer risk. So when we look at the research is clear. We really want to reduce our consumption of red meats, which include beef, pork, and lamb. I know a lot of people don't think pork is a red meat, and it is considered a red meat. And we want to avoid processed meats for cancer prevention as much as possible. So processed meats include meats that have been preserved by smoking, curing, or salting, by the addition of chemical preservatives. Here are some examples: ham, bacon, hot dog, salami, bologna, etc. And there is convincing evidence that red meats and processed meats may cause colorectal cancer. So when it comes to cancer prevention, we really want to avoid processed meats and reduce our red meat intake. Just some facts on cooking meat. There's actually cooking methods that can help reduce potentially or harmful compounds that are typically produced when we cook meat at high temperatures. So heterocyclic amines, for example, when we char meat at high temperatures, are produced when we cook meat, these potential cancer-causing compounds. So using lower heat methods, such as slow cooking, can actually help reduce these compounds. And even marinating, mixing, or rubbing meat with polyphenolics are these beneficial compounds in plants, such as herbs, spices, using olive oil, lemon juice, citrus, etc., prior to cooking has been found to be very helpful. And also removing the skin from poultry before cooking it has been found to significantly reduce the heterocyclic amine production. So pretty fascinating. Now, I just want to very briefly touch on not all animal foods are associated with cancer. There's lack of evidence that poultry, fish, or eggs are associated with an increase or decrease in cancer risk. So we really need more research in this area. We do want to consider the quality of our animal products. So even when we're purchasing poultry or eggs, et cetera, we do want to go with, organic or humanely raised, grass-fed, pasture-raised, AKA animals that have been raised the way nature intended, for many reasons. We know that this can help certain, conventional animal products had been found to have certain fats that are more of certain fats that are pro-inflammatory, also just in terms of reducing our exposure to harmful chemicals such as antibiotics and artificial hormones given to conventionally raised animals. Choosing organic and focusing on quality can help reduce our exposure to potentially harmful chemicals as well. And there's conflicting research regarding dairy. So I just like to mention that for colon cancer, dairy has been associated with a decreased risk of colon cancer. But then for prostate cancer, there's a possible increased risk. And again, I just like to give this information so you can make the most informed choices possible for your body. Of note, prostate cancer patients should limit egg yolks to 2 egg yolks a week. So I always like to share that fact specifically for prostate cancer patients, which involves choline and some science I won't get into for the purpose of this webinar. Really briefly, no amount of alcohol has been found to be safe when it comes to cancer prevention. Alcohol is considered a carcinogen. So I always like to mention that since a lot of people ask about alcohol, there's no amount of alcohol that is considered safe. Red wine, I know a lot of people ask, well, what about red wine? Well, red wine, the research does not support considering red wine to be separate from other alcoholic beverages as it specifically relates to cancer at this time. And also just, when we're eating more fresh plant foods, whole foods, and reducing our intake of processed foods, this can help us limit our sodium intake or salt intake. A lot of packaged and processed foods, food companies add a lot of salt too. And we know that salt and salt preserved foods are a probable cause of stomach cancer. So, and it's not so much the salt that you're adding in cooking, it's more so the salt that is found in these processed foods, packaged foods, canned foods, because there's just so much salt added to these foods. Sometimes more than we might consume, or half of what we might consume in a typical day coming from one frozen meal, for example. So you can always look for low sodium products. Utilizing herbs and spices is absolutely recommended. There's so many benefits of herbs and spices. And I want to point you to, there's actually a herbs and spices ebook that I just created in collaboration with the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program. So if you go on the website, you can actually download this free resource if you want to just read more and learn more about the powerful benefits of herbs and spices. We want to avoid sugary beverages for reducing our risk of cancer. So this includes juices, even fruit juice, sodas, iced teas, energy drinks, etc. And right now, regarding artificial sweeteners, the research essentially, as it relates to cancer, the recommendations from the major cancer organizations are artificial sweeteners. There's no strong evidence that they are a cause of cancer. There's still a lot of controversy and more research is needed, but right now, the major cancer organizations do not recommend avoiding artificial sweeteners as a way to reduce cancer risk. However, artificial sweeteners are highly processed and have been associated with some other potential things such as metabolic syndrome, weight gain, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, alterations in the gut microbiome. So more research is needed. All right, so I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to summarize the main take-home points on reducing exposure to harmful chemicals in food and cooking and point you to some really helpful resources if you want to learn more about this. So essentially what we'll start talking about is endocrine disrupting chemicals. So these are chemicals known to interfere with hormone regulation in the body, such as BPA, which are found in plastics and cans, and phthalates are another example of these chemicals as well. We'll also be talking about how to reduce your exposure to PFAs, which are a large family of compounds. And these have been found to show affect human hormones, even fertility, growth, behavior, cancer risk, etc. So I want to point you to a highly recommended resource. Our Deb, our environment expert in the anti-cancer lifestyle program, she has created many fantastic resources, including blog posts and the Healthy Kitchen Reducing Toxins and Chemical Exposures ebook. So it's completely free. You can download it from the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program website. And this is a fantastic summary from our expert on how to reduce exposure to some of these harmful chemicals. So something we can do is just avoiding plastic and non-stick materials. So when you can, replacing your non-stick pans with items made from stainless steel, cast iron, or ceramic, replacing your plastic utensils with items made from stainless steel or wood, and eliminating plastic water bottles and getting a reusable stainless steel bottle or glass bottle instead of plastic are really helpful ways to reduce your exposure to some of these harmful chemicals. Also, avoiding styrofoam. Styrene found in styrofoam has been classified as a probable carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. It might have some other negative effects as well. So we want to avoid styrofoam. Just cooking more at home and also eating more plants is a wonderful way to reduce your exposure to harmful chemicals that might be found in food boxes or food wrappers, such as grease-proof wrappers often contain PFAs. So just cooking more at home and eating less fast foods is a wonderful way to reduce your exposure to some of these harmful chemicals. Plants, eating more plant foods has been associated with reduced exposure to persistent organic pollutants, which tend to concentrate in the fatty tissue of animal meat. So simply by reducing your animal meat intake and eating more plants, that's actually a wonderful way to reduce your exposure to some of these potentially harmful chemicals. And there's so many other tips as well, which I have listed here, using stainless steel straws instead of plastic, all these fun tips, trying beeswax wrap to wrap your foods instead of plastic. And all of these can be found in Deb's ebook on the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program website. And also she has a webinar on this as well. And here are some other tips that just for the purposes of time, I won't go into. One fun fact I like to give is reducing consumption of canned foods by choosing more fresh or frozen foods. But if you do purchase any acidic foods like tomatoes, trying to purchase them in a glass container versus a can, since the acidity can actually cause some of those chemicals to leach from the can. So just a tip there. Here are a list of helpful resources summarized as we start to wrap up. The Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program website, so much information there. Silentspring.org is a wonderful resource as well, along with some of the other resources I have listed here as well. So always remember that occasional divergence from a healthful anti-cancer diet is expected and normal. This is not about being a perfect eater. There is no such thing. Even myself as a dietitian, you cannot be a perfect eater, right? And that actually might be a sign of disordered eating or even an eating disorder. So there's no need to feel guilty about eating certain foods. Food is not bad. Food is not good. Eating something doesn't make you a good person or a bad person. And no one meal, one food, one beverage will ever, cause cancer. and our relationship with food matters so much, especially to decrease food-related stress, which has the same impact on the body as other forms of stress, and can be harmful. So, in conclusion, enjoying more plants is in line with anti-cancer eating. Aiming to eat less processed foods and really focusing on the totality of your diet is so important. And there's absolutely steps that you can take, simple steps in the kitchen and with food prepping and where you source your food from, to help you reduce exposure to potentially harmful chemicals in food and beverages. Here are my references, and I just want to thank you so much for your time. I do want to share with you my email. So if you do have any questions, crystal@renourishingroots.com. And on that note, I will stop my share. You can open it up to some questions, and I just thank you for your time.
Thank you, Crystal. That was just wonderful, wonderful. I'm just going to say I see a couple of questions that were in the chat. Tomatoes and other nightshades are also associated with arthritis. Any thoughts there?
Great question. So this is where it is so individualized. For certain people, and I work with a lot of folks who have chronic pain, arthritis, it's very individualized, and there is research that shows a small amount of the population who have conditions such as arthritis might be reactive to those foods. But I've also worked with, I've worked with some individuals where we do find that they are sensitive to some of those compounds. And I've worked with other clients who have the same diagnoses, and they're completely fine with those compounds. They're not inflammatory to their body. So I think working with a dietitian or a healthcare professional one-on-one to learn your personal what works best for you and your body, because what I've seen in clinical practice and even the research is that it seems to be very much also affected by our genetics, even our microbiome. There's so many factors that are very individualized. So I would say, for some people, they might be fine with nightshades, and these nightshades foods have been associated with reduced risk of cancer and have a ton of nutrients, but some people may actually be reacting to nightshades and it may not be serving them. So this is where it gets very individualized. That's a great point.
Okay. I think that answers probably another question that says advice for those who have chronic conditions who need to eat gluten-free, like celiac disease. So I think individualized is might be the answer there as well.
Yeah, and for celiac disease, that is one where you absolutely need to avoid gluten. So, some people who don't have celiac disease but suspect they might have a gluten sensitivity, even if you don't have celiac disease, certain individuals may do better with gluten than others. So someone might not tolerate gluten even if they don't have celiac disease, but with a diagnosis of celiac disease, that is, the one time I'm like 100% no gluten.
And then another one, can you give resources or suggestions for eating well without breaking the bank?
Ooh, yes. I love that this question was asked. So this is something I'm really passionate about, especially given the prices of food currently. So something that I always like to think about is that, unfortunately, so meat products tend to be very expensive, especially the higher quality meat products. So like organic or grass-fed. Plant proteins are much cheaper. So things like soy-based foods, tofu, edamame, tempeh, etc., beans, lentils, even whole grains have some protein, such as quinoa. So by increasing plants in the diet, which tend to be, especially the plant proteins, tend to be a lot cheaper than meat. Even one example, I was buying frozen edamame, and it was like $2, and it was so many servings of protein in one bag, whereas if I were to buy the same servings of protein from meat, that would have been much more expensive. Just an example, one example there. So by eating more plant-based proteins, that could really help with our food dollar. Even if you go with canned, like for example, like canned beans or lentils. Lentils are much more quick to cook than beans. So I always say if you can cook your lentils fresh to limit the chemicals in the cans, but there's nothing wrong with, for convenience and affordability and time, going with like low sodium or no salt added canned beans. And then reducing our intake of meat can be really helpful for our food budget. So yes, the higher quality animal products absolutely do cost more oftentimes. If we're reducing our consumption of animal products overall, including the organic and the grass-fed meats, consuming them in smaller amounts, that actually could be helpful for our food budget and freeing up, maybe even freeing up some extra money to get the higher quality animal products. But overall, just eating more of those plant-based proteins can be so helpful for our food budget. And there's other tips as well, but I hope that was helpful.
This is my own personal question, actually. I've noticed that a lot of the fast food places are starting to come out with these plant-based protein things, but I've also been warned against you might be trading off a lot of terrible chemicals for what they're showing as plant-based. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So such a great question. I recently did a webinar with the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program, and you could have access to it free through the Anti-Cancer Lifestyleprogram.org website on plant-based meats and milks. Are they as healthy as they seem? So there's a webinar I did on that, and then also an ebook. So depending on your learning style, you can download the ebook, and I actually go over brands. So I kind of teach you what to look for on the nutrition label of some of these imitation meats. And I'll go over, looking at this brand, I would recommend this and not that. So we actually get into some brands in that ebook, but generally speaking, you're absolutely right. So I don't want to say the name of the brand because I forget which one it is exactly, but there was one plant-based burger I looked into. It's a very popular one. It's one of the very, very popular ones that a lot of people are saying, switching to in an effort to reduce their red meat intake. And it had more saturated fat, which is the fat found in red meat that has been associated with increased risk for heart disease, cardiovascular disease. And the plant-based one had more saturated fat coming from primarily coconut oil that they used than just like a grass-fed, organic burger meat patty. So there is truth that there's a lot of also potentially harmful chemicals in some of those products, and so we just want to be careful. But yeah, some are better than others, and it really takes label reading. And in that ebook and webinar, I go over all of that. So that would be a great resource.
That's awesome. Okay, that's all the questions I see in the chat. Joe, homemade lentil loaf, somebody said.
Ooh.
The PowerPoint is you can download it, so you can have access to all of these slides. And for any additional questions or comments, there's an email address on the screen shortly that you can there it is, that you can refer to. Also, I just wanted to mention that part of our speaker series, we have some upcoming webinars. And one is something you alluded to, Crystal, I probably mess up this word, but the per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS. What are these forever chemicals and why worry about them? That'll be on April 7th at 12. And then we have sun safety, sunscreen, and all the implications around that coming up on May 5th. So look for those information about those webinars coming up. And also, if you would like more information about getting involved in Cancer and the Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania, which I alluded to in the fact that I'm a member of, you can visit their website at censwpa.org, and I think that will go in the chat as well. Lots of ways to get involved in a big way or a small way if you're interested in cancer and environment and how they relate. So thank you very much, Crystal. That was wonderful. And thank you everybody for attending the webinar today. And that's all. Have a great day. Thank you.